Shevuos, Dalet Aleph.
Base.
Okay. The oath of testimony applies to men, but not to women. To non-relatives, but not to relatives of those to those qualified.
You're an Aleph. You want base.
Oh, I'm sorry. I knew I read this before. Okay. They are liable for the willful transgression of the oath, as well as for its inadvertent transgression, coupled with the willful transgression of the testimony. But they're not liable for its inadvertent transgression. Now, what are they liable for? For the willful transgression of the oath, a variable sin offering. What is the case of the oath of the testimony? If he says to two, come and testify for me, and they reply, we swear that we do not know any testimony for you, or they say to him, we do not know any testimony for you, and he says, I adore you, and they apply, amen, they're liable. If he adored them 5 times outside of court, and they came to the court and confessed, they are exempt. If they deny that they're liable for each one, if they endured them 5 times before the court and they denied, they are liable only once. Said Reb Shimon, what is the reason? Because they cannot retract and confess. If they both denied simultaneously, both are liable consecutively. The first one is liable.
Both are liable. Semicolon. Sick?
Yes. Consecutively, the first one is liable, comma, and the second one is exempt. If they denied and one admitted, the denier is liable. If there were 2 pairs of witnesses and the first one denied and then the second one denied, both are liable because the testimony could be upheld by either of them.
Okay. Mashbi'ani aleichem, says the plaintiff. He brings his witnesses and he says, I want you to come and give testimony for me. I want you to give testimony. I've got 4 things by him, right? First of all, he's looking after something for me, a pikadon. Tumas yad, he's also Tumas yad is a loan, right? Ezel. Furthermore, he also stole stuff from me, and he found one of my lost objects. So I've got a claim on him on 4 counts. So, and the witnesses say, Shevuos she'ein anu yodin lach edus, and they say one thing: we don't know anything about this matter. Ein chayvin ela achas. So if they're perjuring themselves, then they only chayav one time. Shevuos she'ein anu yodim sheyesh lach biyad ploni pikadon asumas yad v'gazel v'aveda. If they specified each separate item that they don't know any knowledge about, each one is a separate count that they're over. Okay, so now he says, Mashbi'ani aleichem im lo tavu te'iduni sheyesh li biyad ploni pikadon chitin sorim mekusmin. He was looking after my wheat, my barley, and my spelt. Okay, so they say, Shevuos she'ein anu yodim lach edus. So once again, they just say one statement, then they only have once for perjuring themselves. But if they specify each thing that they don't know about, so the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about different categories of things that he can make them swear for, and the second part is talking about different things, different objects within the same category, and the halacha is the same for both. So Mishnah Vav comes and talks about the different categories the things that you can make a Shevuos Eidos for, and what you'd be chayav for. And the general principle, as we'll see between this Mishnah and the next, is that the Shevuos Eidos can only be for things where the defendant would be chayav b'din, that he has to return something that. Or pay back damages, or whatever it is that he stole, something that was in that's magia to the owner, to the claimant. Okay, so we'll see the example of this is Mashbi'ani aleichem im lo tavu te'iduni sheyesh li biyad ploni nezik v'chatzi nezik. Okay, damage, full damage, like for example, Shane, an animal comes and eats something. Okay, so he has to pay. And regel, Shane and regel is he pays full nezik. Okay, tashlum kefil. Okay, and chatzi nezik, of course, is like is a tam that gores, or anything else that's the chatzi nezik. We've learned about that before. Tashlum kefil. What about double payments? For example, if he stole, and now he has to come and pay double. Tashlum arba v'chamisha, or when it comes to livestock, for a 4- or 5-fold payment. Or she'anas ish ploni SBT. That this person actually raped my daughter, and therefore he has. Now, when it comes to this is a little pointer, that a subtlety that we got to be clear about, is that if someone is modeh b'knas, we learned about if somebody has a fine. So, for example, there's a knas, and a knas is anything that's a fixed value that doesn't matter what the object was. It's just, for example, rape or seduction of a girl is a 50 shekel fine. That's it. Okay. Or the kofir, if his ox bores a slave,
Right.
is a kofir of 30 shekels. Finished. That's just katsuv that the Torah said. So that's called a knas. And a modeh b'knas, if somebody admits that he's liable, then he doesn't have to pay the knas. But there are other things. If he admits that he raped a girl, fine, he doesn't have to pay the knas, but he does have to pay the boshes and the tsar and the other things that are related to it, because now that he's confessed that, okay, right. So he gets away on some counts, but not on all of them. And that's what this is talking about, that he has to SBT, that he's not claiming the fine, but he's claiming the boshes and the pagam and the tsar. Okay. Ufita SBT, or he seduced my daughter. So then the only difference between the ones and the between the rape and the seduction is that there's no tsar.
What if he said, I want to marry her because he had relations with her?
So that he could, but he still has I think he would. That's actually a good question. Would he be chayav? Would he be chayav in the other things? Because he only has to pay the knas if he's actually if he refuses to marry her. Otherwise, it goes into a kesubah. But the tsar, no, he still has to pay the nezik and the tsar and the boshes. Those he would still have to pay.
Right.
Okay. Veshikani bini, or that my son injured me. Now, but if my son injured me, if it's a chayav misa, then he wouldn't have to pay anything at all. But this must be that he injured me without causing a wound. Okay, so what he wants is now to claim the he wants to claim the damages from his son. Okay, or somebody else injured me, or there's a nezik of it. He set fire to my haystack on Yom Kippur. Why Yom Kippur as opposed to Shabbos? Because Shabbos he'd be chayav misa, and then he doesn't have to pay nezik. But Yom Kippur he's just chayav kares, and therefore it's still claimable. The amount is still claimable in court. So all of these things, if they refuse to give testimony, they're denying a rightful payment that the claimant has on the defendant. Okay, so in all these cases, they would have to bring the korban for the korban olav for swearing falsely about not having testimony. Okay, now some counter examples on the other side. So all of these cases that we're going to list in this Mishna are going to be cases. I'll jump to the end where it says Harei Elu Peturim. These Adim would not have to bring the korban for bringing false testimony. Why? Here, let's go through all of the cases. Shani Kohen. They know that I'm a Kohen and he wants to testify and get back into a Kohen, but this is not a monetary thing. It's just a Yechus thing. So first, it has to be a monetary claim that he has, and whether he claims that he's a Kohen, Shani Levi, She'eni ben Gerusha, or that I'm not the son of a divorcee because he wants to keep his Kohen status. She'eni ben Kalutza, She'ish Ploni Kohen, or testifying about a different person, that he is a Kohen, or She'ish Ploni Levi, She'eno ben Gerusha, She'eno ben Kalutza, whether it's for him personally or for somebody else. She'anas ish Ploni es bito. Now, this is an interesting one because there's a bit of controversy about what this means. That a certain man raped his daughter. Now, who's the he? Who's his daughter? It is. Are they talking about that? We're talking about Fred. So come and give testimony that Fred raped his own daughter. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if you look at it that way and read it that Fred raped his own daughter, then we're gonna say, okay. He's chayav misa for that, and therefore there's no monetary damage. Okay, but that's also a little difficult to explain because it's usually the father who receives the damages. Unless it's a grown-up daughter, in which case she would receive the damages. So that's probably what it's talking about, is that he raped his grown-up daughter, and they're trying to give the damages to her, but since he is chayav misa for doing it, then he wouldn't have to pay. So we're talking about where there was no hasra. Okay, or alternatively, it could be that Ish Ploni, that Fred raped Bob's daughter. Okay, and what they're trying to do over here. So why wouldn't that work? Aside from the knas, he has to pay boshes and pagam, which is mammon. And if according to this interpretation, even if he comes the harsha. So now basically it's a third party coming and asking him to testify on behalf of Bob.
Right.
Bob wants to claim from Fred. It doesn't help to be mechayev eidim because of the Shevuos eidos. She'ein kocho shel hamorshe kekocho shel tovea. So the agent, Bob's agent, is coming and saying, "I want you to come and swear." He doesn't have the same koach to force a shvua on the eidim as the tovea himself does. But for mammon, which he because that's new money that hasn't ever been in Bob's hands, and that's the difference that we have. If it had been Bob with a deposit that he had in Fred's hands, then for sure it's magia to him, and there the agent would have the power to force an oath on the witnesses. But if it's new money that he's trying to claim for those damages, then you need the original tovea to make him swear. So those are two different interpretations of what it means. She'anas ish ploni es bito. It may be simpler to, and I think Rashi takes that view that it's that was talking about that Fred raped his own daughter, or pita es bito, or he seduced her. Shechavel bi bani, or he says, I want you to come and testify that my son injured me,
Right,
wounded me. Now the son here is going to be in a case of chayav misa. So again, mammonus is not going to happen. So therefore, his testimony is not going to be helpful. If he did one of these things on Shabbos, then because he's chayav misa for doing them on Shabbos, so the witnesses wouldn't have been able to help him claim monetary damages, and therefore the whole din is patur. The eidim are patur even if they perjure themselves.
either they perjure themselves.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that one, but that's
it's a complicated one. I think it's easier, and it kind of fits in more easily with the rest of the Mishnah to say that we want to give testimony that Fred raped his own daughter, and the daughter is wanting to claim the damages.
So she should testify also, though, of course.
Well, it doesn't help because even if you had two witnesses who saw it and they testified against him, he still wouldn't have to pay damages because he's mesa.
Right. You can't give him right. Think him both.
And could they testify against him to be b'chayv misa? Yes, they could if they gave him hasra. But we're talking here about a case where, let's say, they didn't give hasra, so they can't be b'chayv misa. But because it's a din misa, he also is patur from damages. Okay, Aleph Daled.
For one in which there were no awareness either in the beginning or the end, the he-goats of the festivals and the he-goats of Rosh Chodesh atone. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says the he-goats of the festivals atone, but not the he-goats of Rosh Chodesh. And for what do the he-goats of Rosh Chodesh atone? For a person who is tahor and who ate a sacrifice which was tameh. Meir says the atonement of all that the he-goats is alike. Of all the he-goats is alike. For the tomb of the temple and the holy things, Ben Shimon was wanting to say that the he-goats of Rosh Chodesh atone for a person who is tahor who ate a sacrifice that is tameh. Those are the festivals atone for a kid who had no awareness either of the beginning or the end of the festival. And the shir was of the beginning or the end of Yom Kippur, atones for one who has no awareness at the beginning and awareness at the end. They said to him, may one be sacrificed for another? He replied, they may be sacrificed. And they said to him, since the atonement is not alike, how can they be sacrificed one for another? And he said to them, all of them come to atone for the tumah of the temple and its holy things. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says in his name that he goes to Rosh Chodesh or so for a person who is tahor, who ate a consecrated sacrifice. Those are the festivals surpass them in a way that they atone for a person who is tahor, who ate a contaminated sacrifice, or one who had awareness in the beginning or at the end. Those of Yom Kippur surpassed in that they atone for a person who was tahu, ate a contaminated sacrifice, and one who had no awareness either at the beginning or at the end, and for one who had no awareness in the beginning but had awareness at the end. They said to him, may one be sacrificed for another? And he said to them, they may be sacrificed for another. He said to them, may one be sacrificed for another? He said to them, yes. He said to him, if so, those of Yom said to them, yes. They said to him, if so, or those are, I got confused. If so, those of Yom Kippur may be sacrificed on Yom Kippur, Rosh Chodesh. And how can those on Rosh Chodesh be sacrificed on Yom Kippur to effect the atonement which does not belong to them? He said to them, they all come to atone for the tumah of the temple and its holy things.
Right. And I think there's one more, right?
One more.
Yeah, one more.
For the liberate tumah of the temple and its holy things, the he-goat which is sacrificed inside, and the he-goat and him kippur alone, there are other transgressions of the Torah, whether light or grave, willful or unintentional, of which there was aware and of which there was unaware, positive commandments and negative commandments, those liable to karas and capital sins, the he-goat was sent away to Azrael, testifies. Tones. Okay. All right. Yeah. And we have Sanhedrin. Okay. Gimel Hay.
Yes.
Gimel Chet. Whenever he brings proof, he can overturn the verdict. If they said to him, produce any proofs you have within 30 days, if he finds evidence within 30 days, he can overturn the verdict. After 30 days, he cannot overturn the verdict. So Shimon ben Gamliel, what should this man do if he could not find evidence within the 30 days, but found after 30 days? They said to him, bring witnesses, and he said, I have no witnesses. Or they said, bring evidence, and he said, I have no evidence. And subsequently, he brought evidence and witnesses. It is nothing. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who said, who should this man do? Right? Who should this man do if he did not know? At the time that he had witnesses and he later discovered witnesses, or if he did not know at the time and had evidence that he later discovered evidence, if they said to him, bring witnesses, and he said, I have no witnesses, bring proof, and he said, I have no proof. When he saw that was about to be judged liable, he said, let so-and-so approach and testify for me. And he took the evidence from his belt, and it is nothing. Both civil and capital cases require inquiry and examination, as it is stated, one judgment you shall have for yourselves. What is the difference between civil cases and capital cases? Civil cases are tried by 3, capital cases by 3, capital cases by 23, civil cases are open and with the consideration of either acquittal or liability. Capital cases must be open with a consideration of acquittal or guilt. Civil cases are decided by a majority of 1, where they are acquittal, or liability cases are decided by a majority of 1 for acquittal, but for a majority of 2 for guilt. Civil decisions may be reversed in favor of acquittal or liability. Capital decisions may be reversed only in favor of acquittal, but not in favor of guilt. In favor of acquittal, but not in favor of guilt. In civil cases, anyone may argue for acquittal or liability. In capital cases, anyone may argue for acquittal, but not everyone may argue for guilt. In civil cases, one who argues for acquittal may argue for liability, and one who argues for liability may argue for acquittal. In acquittal cases, either one argues for guilt, they may charge for acquittal, but who argues for acquittal may not argue for guilt. Civil cases are tried by day and may be included by night. Civil cases may be tried by day and concluded by night. Civil cases may be concluded by day, and whether for acquittal or for liability, and acquittal cases may be acquitted on the day that we capital cases may be concluded on the day that we're acquittal, but only on the following day for guilt. Therefore, trials are not held on Friday or on the day before a festival. In judging cases of Tuma and Tara, they begin with the most eminent. In capital cases, they begin from the side. All are eligible to judge civil cases, but not all are eligible to judge capital cases. Only Kohanim, Levim, and Yisraelim were eligible to have their daughters marry Kohanim.
Okay.
Okay.
Baba Kama Gimel Hey.
If one came with his jug and another came with his beam, and this one's jug broke on that one's beam, and he is exempt, since this one has the right to walk and this one has the right to walk. The owner of the beam was first and the owner of the jug second, and the jug broke the beam on the beam. The owner of the beam was exempt, but the owner of the beam stopped, he is liable. However, if he said to the owner of the jug, stop, he is exempt. If the owner of the jug was first and the owner of the beam second, and the jug broke on the beam, and he's liable, but the owner of the jug stopped, he is exempt. However, he said to the owner of the beam, stop, it is liable. He is liable. If the same applies if one comes with his candle and this one with his flax. If two were going to a public domain, one was running and one was walking, or both were running and they injured one another, both are exempt. Okay. One more?
Yeah, one more.
We finished that. Though if one chops wood in a private domain and damages in a public domain, or in a public domain and damages in a private domain, or in a private domain and damages in another private domain, he is liable.
Right.
Okay. We have Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, we have Dalet Hay.
Yes.
This is the order of the blessings. He recites the blessings called patriarchs, the blessing called powers, the blessings called holiness of the name, and includes kingship verses with them. But the person designated to blow of the designated to blow does not blow the shofar. He recites the blessing of the holiness of the day and blows, remembrance and blows, shofars and blows. Then he recites the blessing of the sacrificial service, the blessing of Thanksgiving, and the blessing of the Kohanim. These are the words of Yochanan ben Nuri. Said Rabbi Kiva to him, he does not blow the shofar at the beginning of kingship. Why does he mention it? Rather, he waits. Rather, he recites the blessing of patriarchs, powers, and the holiness of the name, and then includes kingship with the holiness and the holiness of the day, and blows and blows. Remembrance and blows, shofars and blows. Then he recites the blessing of the sacrificial service, thus blessing the blessing of Thanksgiving and blessing of the Kohanim. They recite fewer than 10 fewer than 10 kingship verses. Then that 10 remembrance verses, then 10 sofa verses, then Yochanan ben Nuri says if he recited 3 verses from each of them, he has discharged his obligation. They should not recite any verse of remembrance, kingship, or shofar which alludes to punishment. He begins with verses from the Torah and ends with concludes the punishments for the prophets. Rabbi Moshe says he includes verses from the Torah which he discharged his obligation. Who leads the service of the Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah? The second chazan, the shofar to be blown. But when Hallel sound, first chazan recites the chazan. No, man, recites the Hallel. Hallel. I'm better in the morning. You noticed?
You what?
I'm better in the morning reading. Not really. All right, pay.
Well, it still is morning technically.
Yeah. Pay. Well, this measure applies to the priests, Levites, and Israelites. If he wants to save, he takes half and gives half. If he has a small quantity, he places it before them, and they divide it among themselves. They do not give a poor person who wanders from place to place less than a loaf worth pundum. Yeah, I know. When 4 says cross a cellar. If they stay overnight, then they give him a night's outfit. If he stays over Shabbos, they give him food for 3 meals. He who has food for 2 meals may not take from the tamchu, food for 14 meals, and may not take from the kupah, and the kupah is collected by 2 and distributed by 3. He who possesses 200 zuz may not take leket, shekel, chapeh, or ma'aser einei. If he had 200 less 1, then even 1,000 give him together, he may take. If there were 3 mortgages to his creditor or his wife's ketubah, he may take, but they do not compel him to sell his house and his utensils.
Okay. And tomorrow we're starting Demai.
We finished tomorrow. Yeah.
We're finishing Paya tomorrow and moving on to Demai.
Okay, and we have Caleb.
Yeah.
Okay. Base. No, yeah, base.
Base.
Just base. I'm telling you, gonna go for a drink. A stove in its beginning is 3 finger breadth, and its remnants are 3 finger breadths. But the time its manufacture is completed. What is considered the completion of the manufacture? From when heats it enough to cook on it, the most easily cooked egg, which has been beaten and put into a stone pot. The kupak, which is if one made for baking, is measured is that of half an oven. That's wrong. A coupon, if one made it for baking, its measure is that of an oven. If one made it for cooking, its measure is that of a stove. A stove that juts out 1 handbreadth from an oven and 3 finger breadths from a stove is a connection. A stone that juts out of a kupak, if one made it for baking, its measure is that of an oven. If one made it for cooking, the measure is that of a stove. Rabbi Yehuda says they only said 1 handbreadth between the oven and the wall, and 2 ovens were adjacent to each other. 1 handbreadth is allotted to one oven, 1 handbreadth to the other oven, and the remainder is tahor. The rim of a stove is tahor. The enclosure of an oven, when it is 4 tefachim high, it contracts tuma, its contact and airspace, but less than that is tahor. If it was connected to the oven even on 3 stones, on 3 stones, it is tummy. The flask receptacle and the spice receptacle and the lamp receptacle of the stove can contract tuma via contact, but do not contact tuma via airspace. These are the words of Reb Meir and Reb Mishna rules them tahor. Okay. An oven that was heated from the outside, or that was heated without his intent, or that was heated as an artisan's workshop is tummy. It once happened that a fire broke out above the ovens of Kefar Signa, and the case came to Yavna, and Rabbi Gamliel ruled the oven's tummy.
Okay.
Well,
No.
okay. My time.
Wonderful, brothers.
You have a great enjoy.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.